The Grenlec Debates, powering bright ideas.
You're watching the 11th season of the Grenlec Debates. Please bear in mind that matches, topics, and positions are randomly selected by schools. The theme for the semifinals is climate change. And the motion is, be it resolved that major flooding in Grenada in August 2018 is attributable to climate change. The proposition, Presentation Brothers College. The opposition, St. Joseph's Convent, St. George's. Please welcome the first speaker for the proposition.
Good morning, all. Be it resolved that major flooding in Grenada in August 2018 is attributable to climate change. Brothers and sisters, welcome to the battle of ideas. We, the proposition, stand firm in our belief that major flooding in Grenada in August 2018 is attributable to climate change. As first speaker, I will define only the salient terms of the moot and provide data that will show the flooding in August 2018 was an anomaly. My second speaker will explain how climate variability is symptomatic of climate change and will also put the flooding in the context of national and regional events. According to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, climate change refers to any change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. Attributable, according to Collins Dictionary, states, and I quote, if something is attributable to an event, situation, or person, it is likely that it was caused by that event, situation, or person. Honorable Chair, the word likely does not mean only. It connotes probability or possibility, but not exclusivity. What is my point here? We are not in any way advocating that major flooding in Grenada in August 2018 was solely caused by climate change, but that it was likely caused by climate change. Were the drains blocked? Maybe. Was there pollution? Maybe. Was there poor land use practices? Maybe. These factors may create the very similitude that they were the causes of the flooding, but their true role serves only as evidence of failure to implement adequate mitigation strategies to combat the real cause of the flooding, which is climate change. According to the Grenada Southern St. George Climate Vulnerability and Risk Assessment Report 2016, and I quote, the general circulation model projections of rainfall span both an overall decrease and increase, ranging from -40 to 70 millimeters per month by 2080, end of quote. What does this translate to for Grenada? Longer periods of drought and more intense rainfall. Let us examine the intensities of the rainfall in Grenada in August 2018. The Land Use Division, Ministry of Agriculture and Lands, in the preliminary assessment of rainfall received, August 1st, 2018, indicated that data recorded at the Ministry of Agriculture, Laurel Lands Farm, located in St. David's, showed that between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., 9.05 inches of rainfall was received. This is equivalent to 226.25 millimeters of rain over a 14-hour period. Between 1991 to 2015, according to the aforementioned Climate Vulnerability Risk and Assessment Report, the maximum monthly rainfall in the sample period occurred in August 1995 with 446 millimeters of rainfall, and this was for an entire month. Yet, here we have, on the first day of August 2018, over 50% of this amount of rainfall was recorded in only a 14-hour period. Let me break it down for you. In August 1995, the daily average rainfall, if rain fell every day of the month, would be 14.38 millimeters per day. This gives an hourly precipitation rate of 0.60 millimeters of rain. 2. On August 1st, 2018, the average intensity recorded was 18.85 millimeters. Compared to 1995, this is 31.41 times the hourly amount of rainfall. According to Jude Andre Charles, meteorological forecaster at the Point Saline Met Office, and I quote, the intensity of the rainfall which occurred in August 2018 was an anomaly, end of quote. This sporadic increase in rainfall has not been recorded in over 25 years. Grenada has flooded before, and maybe that was the effect of the blocked drains and pollution. But in August 2018, this occurrence was because of the intense, unprecedented, unpredictable nature of climate change. I thank you.
The first speaker for the opposition.
Good morning, everyone. We refute our opponent's definitions. According to statistics from the Grenada Meteorological Office, on July 25, 1990, a storm hit Grenada, dumping 161 millimeters of rainfall within 6 hours. NADMA's databases recorded infrastructural damage, but no flooding. On August 1, 2018, a tropical wave affected Grenada, producing rainfall of 127.9 millimeters in 6 hours, significantly less than that of 1990. NADMA, however, reported flooding in built-up areas of River Road, St. George's, and Grand Anse. This, therefore, clearly indicates that existing conditions of these surface areas have been the cause of major flooding rather than intense weather. Given this reason, we strongly oppose the moot. Be it resolved that major flooding in Grenada in August 2018 is attributable to climate change. Focus should be on the human-induced decisions and actions in Grenada, such as indiscriminate utilization of the environment and poorly maintained drains that transform floods, natural hazards, into major disasters. As first speaker, I will define key terms in the moot and highlight how human practices have significantly caused major flooding. My colleague will further expound our arguments. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, defines climate change as alterations to the Earth's atmosphere that occur over long periods, decades to millennia. It can result from natural processes and human activities. Cambridge Dictionary defines attributable as resulted from a specified cause. Therefore, the moot states flooding is specifically caused by climate change. We, however, say no. FEMA.org states, flash flooding is an extreme flow of high water into a normally dry area. This is due to swift accumulation or runoff of surface waters from any source. Hydrologic influences of the ground surface significantly impact the location and severity of flooding. These include land use disrupting the infiltration of runoff water into the soil, reduction of pervious surfaces and deforestation, velocity of surface runoff considering our topography, and construction of natural and man-made waterways. Although rainfall is associated with flooding, what happens to the rain once it is on the ground is most significant. Runoff water, if not properly mitigated, is the cause of major flooding. The August 2018 flooding, therefore, was created by what we have done and what we have failed to do in managing flood risks. Land cover and use, essential influences on runoff water, caused the August 2018 major flooding in Grenada. Consider the places that were severely affected. They are characterized by urbanization and intense infrastructural development. This rapid growth in affected areas continued unabated as seen by the increase in building permits issued by the physical planners in Grenada in the past 5 years for both St. David and St. George. In these areas, the natural environment has been significantly altered, resulting in increased impervious surfaces of concrete and pitch. This reduced the ability of the land to absorb water, thereby increasing the volume of surface water and intensifying the flooding conditions in urban areas such as Montrouge, Westerhall, and Woodlands. According to the geoscience website, meted.oncar.org, as in Grenada's case, we have disrupted natural drainage systems by removing vegetation and building in natural drainage basins. These systems diminish the velocity of the runoff, particularly in places surrounded by hills and mountains. By paving these surfaces to construct buildings, roads, and drains, water travels faster, overwhelming rivers and streams. Consider the St. John River situation. With increased infrastructural development along its waterways in places such as Mungay, Montparnasse, and Darbo, these places now have increased runoff that overwhelm the river banks, causing major flooding. Myrna Julian, senior PRO of the Grenada Solid Waste Management, stated, culverts, especially on the Carnage and Esplanade Mall area, were sealed, so cleaners have no access to remove significant accumulated debris over the years. The reasons for the flooding in the town of St. George, whether moderate or intense rainfall. Judges, these pre-existing conditions and the occurrences a week before the weather events caused the major flooding. I thank you.
The second speaker for the proposition.
We reject the definitions put forth by the opposition and hold our own. The flooding in August 2018 was unusual and can be attributed to climate change. Some misinformed purveyors may suggest that the major flooding in Grenada in August 2018 was attributable to climate variability and not climate change. However, as postulated by Dr. Decima Williams in an interview we conducted, and I quote, "Climate variability is different to climate change. However, we have noticed that variability is out and almost near uncontrollable events that can no longer be considered variability in any scientific way." End of quote. Honorable Chair, even if one was to suggest that climate variability is responsible, time has proven that climate variability is symptomatic of climate change. The warmer temperatures will cause greater flooding because you will now have greater variability in your water cycles. The level of rainfall intensity that occurred in August 2018 is uncommon and has not happened in our recent history. Case in point, during Hurricane Ivan in 2004, a mere 5.6 millimeters of rainfall per hour was recorded. During Hurricane Emily in 2005, a major 1.7 millimeters of rainfall per hour was measured by the Grenada Meteorological Office. During Ivan, which itself was also an anomaly, the volume of torrential downpour recorded pales in comparison to that recorded in August 2018. Subsequently, we had other anomalies such as Irma, Maria, and Harvey in 2017, and Michael in 2018. Climatologist Michael Mann, the director of Earth System Science Center at Penn State University, said the current hurricane scale could be viewed as increasingly irrelevant. Scientifically, 6 would be a better description of the strength of a 200-mile-per-hour storm, and will also better communicate the well-established finding now that climate change is making the strongest storms even stronger. Historically, hurricanes move through categories solely like horses and carriages. No, they are moving like Lewis Hamilton, fast, intense, and unusual, similar to the events of August 2018. According to the World Meteorological Organization, and I quote, "Only a persistent series of unusual events in the context of regional climate parameters can suggest a change in climate has occurred," end of quote. We are not short of these series of events. December 2013, heavy rain in St. Vincent and the Grenadines between 200 millimeters and 310 millimeters in 2 to 3 hours resulted in intense flooding and landslides across the island. Tropical Storm Isaac produced total rainfall accumulations of 2 to 4 inches with isolated amounts up to 8 to 10 inches over Dominica. Trinidad and Tobago's rainfall during their flood was 117.6 millimeters in 24 hours on the 20th of October. They received a full month of rain in only 2 days. Major flooding in Grenada in August 2018 is not an isolated case. It was unpredictable, it was unusual, and it is attributable to climate change. I thank you.
The second speaker for the opposition.
Good morning, all. Our definitions stand. Data from the Met Office and NAMA suggests that in previous years, Grenada had been no stranger to intensified weather events. Judges, what was so special about the one major flooding in August 2018? The existing drainage system on the ground was inadequate, outdated, and heavily compromised with debris and siltation. Rising sea levels did not do this. NAMA reported there was no coastal flooding in August 2018. According to NAMA's assessment of the major flooding, most of the already compromised natural and man-made waterways were blocked. This was due to indiscriminate dumping of waste, impeding the flow of runoff, resulting in flooding. The team observed significant waste such as refrigerators, construction material, household rubbish, and plastic items. They also reported that the buildup of sediment and silt blocked the free flow of water. Mr. Silva McIntyre, head of the National Disaster Management Agency, stated that debris was observed in waterways in affected areas such as St. George's, Montrouge, and in particular Calvini, La Colombe, Wester Hall, and La Sagesse. In addition to this, the week prior to the weather event, 35 and 20 debushing gangs in St. David and South St. George, respectively, were contracted by the Ministry of Infrastructure Development to cut down overhanging trees. The remnants of this work were observed on roadsides and in drains long after the cutting was concluded by Grenadians traversing these areas. The accumulated debris clogged the drains during the tropical wave, further exacerbating the flooding, as the runoff met with resistance from walls and debris, impeding the water flow, resulting in major flooding. Coupled with the aforementioned issues, according to the 2015 Grenada Land Degradation Neutrality National Report, poor agricultural practices such as deforestation and indiscriminate farming lead to land erosion. In July of 2018, as reported by the Ministry of Agriculture, in the St. David area in particular, indiscriminate practices of clearing the land for planting by cutting and burning reduced the vegetation cover. The topsoil, therefore, was directly exposed to the rainfall and was washed down, causing mudslides. These mudslides further aggravated the blockage of natural and man-made drainage systems in August 2018, once again causing major flooding. Judges, our failure to act prior to August 2018 significantly attributed to the major flooding. We have failed, according to Mr. Alphonsus Daniel, mechanical civil environmental engineer, to adequately improve the capacity of our current drainage system to meet the infrastructural needs of our rapidly growing population. We have failed, according to Mr. Fabian Purcell, head of the physical planning unit, to connect existing drainage systems to new ones. We have failed to implement a national land use policy to regulate building in flood-prone areas and around natural drainage systems. Lastly, we have failed to fully implement flood mitigation measures from organizations like the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, measures that include dredging and stabilizing the riverbeds and implementing water pumps to propel water through drains in events of high tide. These alleviate flooding risks, thus protecting our environment and people. The weather produced the rain, but the human indiscriminate activity caused the major flooding in August 2018. I thank you.
The opposition cross-examiner.
Opponent. The weather event brought 127.9 millimeters of rainfall. This amount of rainfall cannot cause a major flood. Is it not the runoff and how it interacted with the existing environment that was the reason for the flood?
Well, the opponent, according to my first speaker, the rainfall that occurred was 226.25 millimeters of rainfall in a 14-hour period. These are the stats that we collected, and we have determined that can cause major flooding.
Either way, my worthy opponent, this amount of rainfall is not significant enough for the damage. That amount of rainfall is not deep enough to support an entire kayak in front of Montrouge.
Of course it is, my worthy opponent. The intensity of the rainfall is what causes the flooding. The intensity caused oversaturation of the soil, and this is a clear attribute of climate change. Climate change causes increased intensity.
Increased intensity. Yes, it was present, but it was not caused by climate change. The ITCZ interfered with a tropical wave, and that has happened over 600 times. My worthy opponent, we need to move on. Would you say that our soil susceptibility to erosion and sliding resulting in the blockage of our waterways is a result of climate change?
Sorry, repeat your question, please.
Would you say that our soil susceptibility to erosion and sliding resulting in the blockage of our waterways is a result of climate change?
Well, the opponent, what happened was the intensity of the rainfall caused oversaturation of the soil that led to landslides. NADMA reported 77 landslides in Grenada, and that is clearly shows the intensity of the rainfall.
My worthy opponent, indiscriminate farming practices have left the soil exposed to this rainfall, which caused the landslides.
But whether or not
climate change had nothing to do with it.
My worthy opponent, whether or not the soil was exposed, the intensity of that rainfall would have caused that amount of flooding either way.
My worthy opponent, fibrous roots have a major part to play in stopping landslides. Would you say that there has been a change in our waste from being mostly biodegradable to being mostly imperishable?
My worthy opponent, that may be, but at the end of the day, that doesn't change the fact that the intensity of the rainfall is what caused the major flooding in Grenada.
When our waste was biodegradable, we could afford to go 10 years without cleaning the drains. But the imperishable waste that is in our drains has reduced the capacity to handle the volume of water, no?
But at the end of the day, my worthy opponent, the rainfall is what causes the drainage to become inadequate. Whether or not there is garbage blocking the drains, whether or not there is blockage, the intensity of that rainfall would have caused the flooding. According, as intimated to us by Mr. Daniel Lalji, the drainage would have had to been 3, 4, or 10 times larger to be able to accommodate that amount of rainfall.
Current drainage is just inadequate.
And it is because of climate change that they have become inadequate. They were not inadequate before.
Even if they were not inadequate before, we didn't have as much blocking before. As I said, our waste was biodegradable.
And again,
moreover, we did not have as much deforestation. There was not as much landslides. My worthy opponent, do you agree that an increase in runoff directly impacted the flooding?
The opponent, I believe that it indirectly impacted the flooding because the impact of the flooding was because of the intensity of...
The proposition cross-examiner.
With the opponent, you just mentioned the ITCZ mixing with the tropical wave. But isn't it true that climate change would increase the intensity of these weather systems? And since you've stated that it's happened numerous amount of times, the fact that we haven't seen this level of intensity and flooding serves to prove that climate change has increased their intensity.
My worthy opponent, here we're not arguing if climate change is at work or not. Here we're arguing if this particular incident was caused by climate change. Seeing as it has happened so many times before, how are we so sure that it's climate change that caused this incident?
Because if it's happened so many times before and climate change is continuously on the rise and we have not seen this level of intensity, it is proven that climate change increases the intensity of these events, meaning that the intensity would have increased.
Why are we going to blame every single weather event on climate change?
That's not what we are doing, my worthy opponent.
Well, it sounds like it.
What do you think is the attributable cause of the major flooding?
My worthy opponent, the indiscriminate dumping of waste. The impermeable surfaces on which the rain lands, which increase their velocity, decreasing infiltration into the soil, increasing runoff, also decreasing evaporation, which also increases runoff. Moreover, we build on floodplains, therefore the water from the mountains cannot go down into the soil when they hit the floodplains, and there's deforestation causing landslide, further blocking our drains.
But do you not agree that these causes you have mentioned are just indirect causes that just exacerbated our vulnerability to climate change?
My worthy opponent, they are direct causing, as no matter how much rain falls, if it lands on land that is unable to accommodate for it, then it is going to flood.
So then the direct cause is the intensity of the rainfall, and the indirect cause are the factors that you speak of.
I did not say that, my worthy opponent.
But that is what I am deducing. That is what we are saying.
My worthy opponent, what I am saying is that it does not matter how intense the rainfall is. What matters is that the land which the rain lands on is able to accommodate for that rainfall.
But doesn't the intensity matter?
Not.
But the intensity does matter, as the intensity determines whether or not the soil is able to hold it or not, and it has not been able to.
What determines if the soil is able to hold it or not is its drainage and its permeable surfaces.
My worthy opponent, how do you justify the intensity of the rainfall in August 2018?
An anomaly, my worthy opponent. It could happen at any time. Are we going to blame every time there is a record of rainfall broken on climate change?
No, but when there is clear evidence of increased amounts of these events occurring, such as my second speaker clearly stated in Trinidad, in St. Vincent, in Dominica, these
there
events
will never be
continuously
any
occur.
proof that this particular event was caused by climate change.
Which is why our definition of attributable states it is likely, which connotes possibility or probability.
How can you say it is likely, my worthy opponent?
But the proof is the events that have occurred before that have led up to this.
That is a correlation, not a causation.
My worthy opponent, if climate change was not the attributable cause to the event in August 2018, how else do you account for the continued extensive flooding in other parts of the region?
Other parts of the region have different topographies, my worthy opponent. They have different weather patterns, my worthy opponent.
But we are speaking of the intensity.
The opposition rebuttal speaker.
My worthy opponents have agreed with us in saying that because our definition of attributable says specifically caused by, and they have attempted to state that poor land use practices is a contributor of the flooding, of the major flooding. Judges, the major flooding was caused by poor land practices. We did not mention anything about climate variability, but the intense rainfall was just because of two natural phenomena converging, the ITCZ and a tropical wave. My worthy opponents have conceived an insignificant argument since they forced a correlation between climate change and major flooding. The intense rainfall was only due to two natural phenomena. Judges, these natural phenomena have nothing to do with the amount of precipitation, but rather we should focus on the lack of adequate drainage that our island contains. Your first speaker stated that climate variability is part of climate change, but failed to provide any significant empirical evidence to support this. You cannot compare St. Vincent, Dominica, nor Trinidad and Tobago to Grenada, which our moot is very specific to. Judges, they have constantly stated this. Worthy opponents, Grenada is very different in topography, terrain, river system, and other contributing factors of our drainage system. Your data does not show causation, but rather a correlation. Excess precipitation does not equate to flooding. Hurricane Ivan was a major hurricane. My worthy opponents, do you not expect major flooding with a major hurricane? Worthy opponents, despite the fact that in 1990 we received much more rainfall, as stated by my first speaker, than in August 2018, how then can we suggest that ANADMA recorded no
flooding in 1990. But however, in 2018, with less rainfall were the opponents, we recorded flooding. Climate change was not even a contributor to one day of major flooding. It was too short of a time span to say climate change.
The proposition rebuttal speaker.
Good afternoon all. My opponents and I have realized some weaknesses in our opposition's arguments. Firstly, your first speaker spoke of increased runoff, but opponents, the oversaturation of the soil is caused by intense rainfall, which is typical of climate change, as was evident on August 1st. 77 landslides, doesn't this show the intensity? 226.25 millimeters of rain in a 14-hour period. That shows the intensity in a short period of time. Secondly, your speakers have continued talking about just flooding, but opponents, you have missed an entire part of the moot. The moot states major flooding. Thirdly, your first speaker intimated that one of the effects is inadequate drainage. But the issue here is not the drainage. The drainage became inadequate as a result of the intense rainfall, which is as a result of climate change, which led to the major flooding. This clearly shows that major flooding is attributable to climate change. Opponents, you also spoke of the ITCZ mixed with a tropical wave. But the ITCZ thrives off of solar heating, which climate change intensifies the temperature in the atmosphere and the sea surface temperatures, intensifying the effects of the ITCZ, as was evident on August 1st. Opponents, you also spoke of the lack of infrastructure, but as intimated to us by Daniel Lalji of physical planning, no matter the infrastructure that was there or not, the fact that we have more intense rainfall is what was the deciding factor. Opponents, you spoke of the types of flooding, one of the types of flooding, which is urban flooding. This urban flooding is infrastructure, but my opponents, no matter the categorization of the major flooding that occurred on that day, the fact remains that the intensity of the rainfall is what caused the flooding. While there may be other factors, these were not attributable causes. The direct cause was the intensity of the rainfall. Opponents, the inadequate drainage. Opponents, as stated us by Daniel Lalji, this would not have made a difference. 3, 4, 10 times drainage was...
And the winner is St. Joseph's Convent, St. George's. Thank you for joining us. Please tune in for the final match of Season 11 of the Grenlec Debates and visit us on Facebook to vote for your favorite debater.
The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas. Vote for your favorite debater on our Facebook page. The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas.